Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legacies, a great episode with a lot of really interesting things that went down. So let's break it down. First and foremost, I'm glad we get this entire episode dedicated to what's happening with Rick, Josie, and Lizzie. And I had to correct something I misunderstood. Like, I knew Lizzie and Josie were making a new, alternate, another prison world. I thought the prison world that they're in right now, Sebastian as well as the other students, I thought that was one that Rick later on made. I think I missed it when he said this is the prison world you made when you were kids. I guess in my head I didn't think about that's the one they made where Kai is. It didn't correlate to the beginning of this episode when they start referencing. I was like, oh my god, so this is where Kai is. And because Rick immediately knew if Kai's free, he knew what that kind of meant. Obviously Lizzie and Josie, Lizzie's kind of upset because Sebastian's here, and it's just kind of Sebastian trying to act all tough, you're not in charge here. Without hesitation, Alaric stabs him with a stake. I was like, yo! He's not BSing around. He's like, oh, when I said we were getting out of here, I'm talking about me and my daughters. You are staying. It's like, yo, did that in front of Elizabeth and Lizzie and just walked away. Obviously, one of those situations, hey, you should talk to your daughters. But to be fair, Alaric has admitted he's made mistakes. I mean, literally no one in its entire universe everyone has made mistakes. But, his are just the ones that are coming back to bite him, because obviously Josie's blaming herself because if she's thinking if I had never done dark magic in the first place, we wouldn't even be in this situation. But then we proceed to see one, because the moment Jade showed up, which interestingly enough, I kept looking, why do I recognize it? Because I saw a name at the beginning, I forgot. Her last name starts with a W, but I was like, why does that name seem so familiar? And I see her, she's the actress, I'm blanking on her character's name too. She was from season 2 of The Punisher. I was like, oh my god! I was like, holy crap! That's so cool. But it seems like Jade, which also I think that's really interesting too. Maybe there's got to be something more to that. It just happens to be that the Triforce of the supernatural world is in this prison. A vampire, a werewolf, and a witch. I just think that's interesting. One of each, not even that. I don't know. You just got to think there's got to be some cosmic reason. That's just this. I mean, maybe it's just kind of maybe because they really didn't have anyone. All they had was each other. Maybe because this was probably somewhat earlier days in the school. I mean, yeah, I think there was this was fairly early in the process of the whole Salvatore school getting made. So it in the grand scheme of things, it makes sense. So. But obviously, Alaric goes off to, check on Kai because he figures that Kai's going, and Kai's there. And I love him being like, oh, who's there? Is it Damon? Is it Bonnie? Is it Catherine? Is it you, Alaric? No, you wouldn't be stupid enough to come in here. And he's singing, I love the crazy that is Kai. Like I said, there's this psychotic charisma he has. Because as we've seen, in the past, and that's sad, Kai could be a good guy if he wanted to, but when he tried to prove himself to be a good guy, it's he was go back to being a bad guy and stuff like that. I mean, granted, that's when Damon sliced his head off to protect Bonnie. But even just that, obviously he came back in the final season, that's a whole thing. But nevertheless, Alaric comes there and he's free because basically Kai's oh no, they let me free and they were going to, they used me as torture, they hunt me down and stuff like that. I'm going ahead and skip around. It's oh no, I'm so surprised. Kai was evil. Oh no, they really, oh what? It's no, I'm not stupid. I knew Kai's too much of a manipulative prick to just be someone's bait. The fact of the matter is, I was you have to be in charge here. There's no surprise in that. I thought that was pretty, I was no, you're not going to fool me. I know who you are, Kai. Lizzie and Josie haven't known him long enough. We've had plenty of experience with Kai to know, there was no question that he was in charge. But it was interesting. He ended up showing up to save her and everything. And I love that he brought up that whole thing of wait, you were planning on dropping that in here with me? No consideration about my safety? I'm shut up, Kai. I love it. But the fact of the matter is, he ends up talking, and it's interesting because basically he dies every day because he's bound to this place. Him, and it turns out literally all the other 3 students, when they die, all of them end up getting resurrected because they were bound to this place like that. So I was that's fascinating. Well, I'll get to that side of things soon. I'm about to bring up the whole Lizzie and Sebastian said, well, I'll go ahead. Because, like, the moment Sebastian's like, oh, there's no one else here, I was like, you're lying. I'm like, why are you lying? Because it turns out, like, because I'm sure, like, it's like, yeah, let, the others have their fun with Josie and Alaric. The only person he cares about is Lizzie. So he's spending his great time with her. That place they were at, isn't that, like... Because at first I was about to say, isn't that, like, the Lockwood estate? Like, where Tyler and his mom lived? I could be mistaken, because, like, I know, like, plenty of balls were held at that place, because, like, those particular stairs, not unless I'm confusing it. Like I said, it's been a while since I've seen the Vampire Diaries, so I'm like, that's what it makes me think of, but it might not be the Lockwood Estate, it might be something else. But regardless, I'm having a fun time and everything, and then comes a good old question of, like, oh, I want to make you into a vampire, which Lizzie has her reservations, because for her, it's like, there's the things like, yeah, being a vampire forever, cool. And she says it even crossed her mind of being a way to get around this whole... Gemini, the merge, that's what I was trying to think of. I couldn't remember the words in my head, but it was like she thought about that as a way around it, but it comes with the downside of once you become a vampire, obviously, like, you can never grow old with anyone. The fact of the matter is you can never have children, obviously, so, it's that situation of stuff she thinks about, so she didn't want to do that. Sebastian kind of gives her the other option. My mind immediately is like, oh, he's trying to protect you because he knew that the others will come after you. And it's like, oh, if you're a vampire, you don't have to worry. You will be able to protect her forever. Well, in general, it might be the thing of like, well, he'll be able to protect her forever. Nothing and no one could ever hurt. But I thought in particular he was trying to make her a vampire to protect her from everyone else in that prison world. I thought it was that. Because it's interesting because Lizzie's side of the story never correlates with that whole revelation. That won't be until like potential like the next episode. But nevertheless, it was interesting with this whole situation because I was like, that's interesting. And we kind of get a little more into the psyche of Sebastian because he calls her Cassandra. It's like, so that's what this is all about. When he looks at Lizzie, he doesn't see Lizzie for Lizzie. He sees her as it's like Cassandra. Like for him, that's why he's so desperate because it's like, oh, like you died before I got the chance to, do this for you, but I won't lose you again, Cassandra. And he's like, I meant Elizabeth. And, for her, it's like now she realizes like, she thought like she found love. She thought Sebastian loved her, but now she realizes like Sebastian's in his complicated mind, he's sadly finding a replacement. We might be dealing with a whole situation of like a doppelganger situation, which I think would be interesting considering obviously Josie and Lizzie are doppelgangers, but the fact of the matter, not doppelgangers, sorry, twins, and the fact is for one of them to have a doppelganger would just be interesting, but I think it's probably a thing of she looks a little bit like Cassandra, but it's probably not a doppelganger situation. Maybe they'll make it go down that road, I don't know, because it could be very reflective, obviously, the whole Elena and Catherine situation, so I think that could be an angle they're going down. But obviously, you can see it breaks, Josie's heart, especially because she fought so hard for him, but also to realize, like, kind of realizing your dad was kind of right to keep you separated from him because, like, the fact of the matter is he would force vampirism on you like that, like trick you into drinking vampire blood. And obviously, Lizzie ends up, sucking some of the magic out of him because literally vampires are a walking magic battery, essentially. So there's that whole situation. So... then there's this like whole Kai and Josie situation. Also, I thought was interesting with the whole Diego thing of like him morphing like that. I'm like, that's interesting. Well, because we know like obviously like certain people like once you've kind of gotten it, you can basically transform whenever you want to. Like certain like wolves can do that. But the fact of the matter is, that's more a hybrid thing, but his whole situation is a completely different thing. But I guess it's because it's like a mutation because he's literally been in there 10 years and every night's a full moon. So literally going through thousands of transformations made him kind of morph into what you would traditionally think of as a werewolf. He basically went full-blown teen wolf. Referencing both the movies and the TV show in that regard. So that was just interesting because like no other wolf is manifested like that in this universe, So I just think that's kind of interesting that he looks like that. But like I said, it's almost like it's a very unique circumstance that led to it. But luckily, Kai showed up and saved both. He saved both Josie and Alaric. But there was also, I skipped over it, but like the whole thing between Josie and Kai I thought was interesting. Like, oh, she's like, I've got it hidden. And he references the teddy bear. I'm like, yeah. Which obviously, I don't know if Josie knows what he's referencing because obviously it's a whole family thing. But I like that where he's like, yeah, I have the Ascendant. And she's like, all right, I have it. He's like, oh, you had it on you the entire time? Because he kept talking about the fact of the matter is, because the whole thing was about, information for information. So that was interesting. And so it turns into a long con. Like I said, no surprise that Kai has been, to be fair, he's been planning this, Granted, he probably was just hoping that eventually someone was going to come in there. He was hoping, probably thinking if anyone was going to go in there, it would be any of the others, but also Alaric, just in case Alaric's stupid enough to go in there to get revenge for Joe. But obviously, it's a whole thing of, at first you're kind of like, oh, did Josie get tricked? Because I had a feeling like she probably had a trick up her sleeve. Turns out she did, because like Kai's attempt to leave, and she's like, oh, and he, like, despite everything, he is kind of impressed. He's like, honestly, I like the switcheroo that you proved. I thought that was kind of interesting. But we did kind of get, I'm skipping, like I said, I do apologize because I'm all over the place, but it's just, there was a lot of fascinating things about this episode, plus getting insight about the students. Like, obviously, they were going to a party. They were already, like, little rambunctious. They're rebels. They're kind of, like, troubled kids. But the fact of the matter is, Alaric and Dorian ended up finding a whole bunch of bodies that were killed and burned. And it's like, oh, those three are at the top of the list. Obviously, Alaric tried to talk to Jade, but Jade was like kind of saying like, oh, like we didn't have any involvement, blah 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 blah. But he found her pin, her Salvatore pin on them and everything, on one of the victims, because it was actually someone that Jade was interested in, and banished him to this place. And I thought it was really interesting, like especially what Alaric says. He's like, yeah, I made a mistake. I should have killed you, because he talks about the fact is the only reason why they got sent to this prison, because he was like, the fact of the matter is you guys were unremorseful. The fact of the matter is, what other choice that I had? The fact of the matter is, it's actually thanks to Caroline that you're in this prison, because if it was up to me, I would have killed all of you, because I couldn't put you back out there in the world being as dangerous as you are. To be fair, this is also a world where the Michelson families around there kicking. They're literally enough of an issue for the world. Obviously, the Michelsons are in a whole complicated nature of their own, but obviously this was 10 years ago, so it's like, well, by this point in time, the Michelsons had calmed down. They weren't as vicious, because this was like, because 10 years ago, that was borderline when Hope was a little kid, so around the time the school had started, so she was like, so it was around like season 4 of the Vampire Diaries, or like at the end of this, so they might even been split up at this point in time, probably most likely, maybe before or after, regardless. Like I said, I'm getting too caught up in the time frame and everything, but yeah, like, but then Jade kind of breaks down, like, obviously the students dragged them out, so even the girl that Jade was into had just tricked them into, it's a thing of, I think she felt bad about it, but at the same time, I think it was a thing that she liked Jay, but it's probably a thing of like, oh, like, she probably wasn't the most popular person, so it's like, oh, these other popular kids, it's that whole thing. But basically, Diego had kind of went nuts, and obviously Wendy just kind of lost a little control, but then Jade, because she found out in that moment she's a Ripper, so at least this brings our total up to at least 3 Rippers that we're aware of: Stefan, MG, and now Jade. And she, sadly, the person she ended up ripping apart was the person she cared about. And then she says that of what she ended up doing, because she couldn't handle what she did, the fear and just like disgust for what she did, what she do, as like she turned off her humanity. I was like, wow, I was like, interesting. We have not seen this in a while. The whole turning off her humanity thing, it's been a while. So it's like, oh, put you in good company. It's interesting because obviously you being a Ripper, well, once upon a time, Stefan went through that because of Klaus told him to turn his humanity off. But it's like, I was there screaming inside for someone to help, but Alaric didn't see the signs. He was inexperienced with it. As I made, it's like, well, you can't really tell that sign, but at the same time, it's like, what did you say, Alaric? You said that she was a good student, that this wasn't her. So it's saying like you weren't looking hard enough, because he had already passed judgment on Diego and Wendy, and it almost seemed like Jade kind of was like, throw the book at them, but I was, you didn't help me, you just punished me. It's like, well, what do you expect? It's not like you helped your case. To be fair, you didn't care enough to help your case, because you're like, oh yeah, punish us, all you're going to do is lock us away. Well, he locked you away, just not in the way you thought. But the fact is, I can understand too, because like, well, Alaric should have known the signs because he's crossed paths with people without their humanity. Let's not forget about that jolly old time Caroline was the woman that you were in love with, who's currently the mother of your children when she turned off her humanity and what kind of a hassle that was. So that's a whole thing in itself, you know, because I obviously remember Carolina had to turn off her humanity because it was her way to deal, it was her way of compensating for the fact when her mom died, she like couldn't handle it, so she had to turn off her humanity so she wouldn't have to feel. So there's that whole thing. So you feel a little remorseful, but at the same time, you're like, but you did do it regardless. But the fact is, it's like, well, you're willing to give MG could have gone down that route, but fortunately enough, MG was lucky enough to be in a position where the person he ended up killing, fortunately enough, was Landon, who turned out to be a phoenix who could come back. So there's that. But obviously Caleb kind of represents that path. But it also, in retrospect, it makes you go, Alyssa got off easy. I mean, to be fair, they found a different route. Because, I mean, to be fair, there's only 3 students they've done this to. I mean, granted, it's 3 too many, but still, you know, obviously Alaric learned from that mistake. He never wanted to go down that route again because they found an alternative. Like, Alyssa's so pissed about what they did to her. Like, obviously this shows that things could have been worse. She could have been locked in a prison world for a long time, but that was supposed to be like a last ditch effort. So like this was supposed to be the means of kind of compensate for that, because Emma and Alaric did, you know, in particular Emma didn't want to go down that route again, so they found an alternative. So that was really interesting, just kind of learning all that. But then like she wants to turn this into a game, like Jade wants to turn it into a game of like, yeah, I'm gonna hunt you down, maybe if you survive 24 hours I'll let your daughter go. So there's that whole situation. And when the time comes, like, they're, like, looking for him, but it's like, wait, because the moment they're pulling out the map, trying to, like, find him and everything, I was like, oh, he's going to be there already. And it's like, oh, he is. He's underneath them. He's headed to the armory, because obviously Alaric knows where a lot of stuff is hidden that you might not be aware of, and he's getting locked and loaded for this battle. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you're also forgetting, Alaric's kind of good at this whole monster hunting thing. I mean, he's been doing it a lot more recently. I mean, going up against a lot of stuff. You guys are kind of old school. You're vampires, witches, and a werewolf. He's faced off against a lot of stuff subsequently since, because of the whole Malivore situation. So there's that whole thing. And then on top of all of that, you know, you have the situation of, you know, like I said, Kai trying to make his escape. And it was like, Kai was like, oh, he found another way. I was like, why? Is there Bennett blood here or something? I was like, how is that going to be? Oh, right. There's the Malivore pit he talked about. It's like, right, because we know that the Malivore pit has been around for a very, very long time. And we've gotten knew exactly where it would be in all this time. So that sucks that Josie ended up giving him that information. And in the grand scheme of things, circling back to the Alyssa thing, her need for revenge literally made things as worse as possible in many different regards. Because before Kai decides to throw himself in Malivore, he's like, let me give you a piece of advice. Literally, the only way you're going to get out of here is with that dark magic you got locked away. You're going to have to break it and absorb it. Then you'll be powerful enough to rip open. But for him, I'm like, when he starts suggesting stuff, I was like, because you're only suggesting that because you knew it'd be a middle finger to literally not just Rick, the entire family. Because it's like, to get out of here, to save you and your family, you're going to have to become a monster just like me. So obviously showing that vision that Josie kept seeing of herself burning down the Salvatore school, like, well, it seems like it's coming true. Not unless that ends up being here in this prison world, which also begs the question, is like, well, because it's not like, they're not going to want to leave Josie here, but they might not have a choice but to leave her in here considering what she is right now. But being as powerful as she is, she probably can rip her way through. So she's trying to do it before Kai jumps himself into Malivore, because the moment he goes in, she forgets. Which I'm also curious to see what that means. I mean, I guess because, like, can remember the spell that makes everyone remember what Malivore made them forget. That includes hope. That doesn't protect from future things being forgotten. It makes it so, I would assume so, because obviously Josie wouldn't be worried. So Kai popping up again, he's forgotten. So he's a powerful threat that's on the loose that they don't know to be aware of, on the lookout for. Well, everyone on the outside, no, because like I said, it's like once you're going into Malivore, but it's like it's a technicality, because technically he's been in those 10 years. Technically speaking, I guess. I don't know, because the way Malivore works, he went in there, so does it mean that in that moment, has he secretly been... No, because it's like, it's a prison world, so it's like, it is a portal, so even though it's in that prison world, it's still a portal, so it was... Because I was an idiot, I was kind of thinking of it like a time travel thing of like, oh, he jumped into Malivore, stayed in there for 10 years and popped out. It's like, No, he literally went from point A to point B. It's a warp because the portal was already there's literally a gaping hole where obviously the necromancer is that kind of gave Kai a means out. So he wasn't trapped in the prison like they thought he would be. So there's that whole situation. But like I said, that's worse because now no one knows that Kai exists. Even if everyone else was aware of Kai, like Caroline, like Dorian, or Emma, the fact of the matter is none of them remember now. But that's why I'm like, is it a technicality because of that? Because was he in there long enough for them to potentially forget? He was there. I mean, it was in a prison world. So yeah, the people there, their memories would be affected. But technically that was a different world. So that's why I'm like, Malivore acts as a technicality. So like, does everyone on the outside remember Kai, or have they forgotten him too? Because I would assume that would work even across a prison world, because Malivore kind of breaks those rules. Like I said, I'm overthinking it, I know, but still, that's crazy. But Josie releasing that, obviously it has an effect on her and Lizzie. Because at first I was like, if Josie goes evil, does that mean potentially that Lizzie might go evil because of that? But it seems like she's knocked out. It doesn't look like she died. It's like obviously not the best position to be in, considering the fact that she's got vampire blood in her system. Granted, because she needs a full 24 hours before that goes out of her system. So I'm curious to see what that ends up turning into, because it might be a situation where Josie ends up killing Lizzie, but because she's got vampire blood in her veins, she becomes a vampire. Which obviously that depends. Could be the whole MG situation. Like Sebastian might have had, it's like, oh, it works out for me. It's like, well, the fact is Lizzie's not going to fall in love with you because she knows that when you look at her, you see someone else who's the person that's always been in love with her and has always accepted her for who she is. And, it's always kind of been a friend to her. It's a whole complicated thing, but it's like, MG, this could be a window for that opportunity to come about, which obviously would suck for Alaric, because it's like, well, one of his girls, well, for one, is pure kind of evil right now, and the other one potentially a vampire. I mean, granted, Caroline's a vampire, so she'd be around to keep an eye on one of her daughters, but the other complicated thing of like both Alaric and Josie would eventually die, that's a whole thing in itself. So but like I said, now Kai is free, working with a necromancer. Most people he's brought up are just people serving him, but now it's like, well, you got an ally with a brain. I wonder if the necromancer going to try to control him. It's like, it's probably more like, let's enter a partnership and everything, which last thing you need is those two joining forces, but that's happening. So, and obviously, Alaric's going to try and deal with his 3 misbehaving students. What that's going to turn into with evil Josie running around. I am so curious to see how this whole situation plays out going forward into the next episode. It's going to get wild. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.